research that I've been doing for well in excess of 20 years. In the late 90s, something like nearly 20 years ago, so 17, 20 years ago, get the sun out of that, I published this book, The Biggest Secret, which at the time many people thought, as usual, that I was crazy to suggest and name um, many famous people, both sides of the Atlantic, in relation to paedophilia, Satanism, and horrific, violent abuse in some cases of children and young people. Ike's mad, that's too far fetched. Well, what you realize when you research these subjects in any depth and for any length of time is that the definition of far fetched takes a way big expansion once you realize what the rich and famous are doing behind the facade that we see in the mainstream media and the mainstream world. And one of the themes that comes out of this is networks of child traffickers and networks of this, and the documents talk about how people like one of the girls, now a woman who is making these claims, Virginia Roberts, how they were flown around the world to Britain and other places as part of this network that they talk about. And it's very difficult for people, I understand, to conceive how organized all this is in terms of the paedophile networks and the satanic networks and so on, which interpenetrate politics and banking and all of these things that direct the world that we live in and the society that we live in. But if you imagine the world, the planet, and then you lay over the planet a web, a network of strands in a web. And at that point, you're looking at the world and you're looking at strands and connections all over it. It's obvious. But now, put countries on top of that web, put corporations on top of that web, put cultures, put belief systems, put all these different expressions of human society on top of that web. Put the banking system on top of that web with all the apparently different banks competing with each other. And like I say, put the countries on top of that web and all the things that you see in society. And now you look at that and you would see a series of individual situations. You'd see individual countries, you'd see individual banks, individual media operations, in individual corporations of biotech and pharmaceutical and all the rest of them. But even though everything now looks like diverse and there's all these different unconnected things you're looking at, so how can there be any connection and any coordination? I mean, look at it, it's different, there's lots of different things. Underneath all that is that web, is that network. And you start to realize when you do the research, and it takes a long time and it takes a lot of dedication to pour through this stuff year after year. What you find is this bank and that corporation, that government, they're all expressions of the same web. Child trafficking, prostitution, and all the horrors that go with that. And it's everywhere, child abuse. And the Member of Parliament who's been the most vocal in demanding action and exposure of those involved, particularly in the political arena, said this week that the scale of child abuse is basically staggering, and what the heck is going on? Well, I've been on the case for a long time, as readers of my books will know. And the time is coming when, to answer these sorts of questions and to answer other mysteries about the way the world is run and what happens, we really do need to move beyond the concrete-minded, programmed, since birth view of the world, reality, and everything. Because questions like, why, as it's becoming clear, I've been writing it for a long time, but it's becoming clear in the public arena now, why is it that worldwide the scale of child abuse is almost unimaginable? Well, that question can be answered, but not by staying within the straitjacket, tiny straitjacket at that, of conventional views of the world. And, you know, we're born into this program, and the program is downloaded to us through parents who've already downloaded the program, through the education system, through the media, through academia and what passes for science, through politics. It's all downloading the program, which is a particular worldview within incredibly narrow lines of limitation. And if you try to explain the world in all its forms and expressions from that perspective, you're never going to do it. You're going to find cul-de-sacs all over the place that you can't go any further, because if this worldview of reality, etc., is true, then what seems to be happening can't be possible. So it can't be explained by that. And science is not something like official history. It's not something to reveal. It's actually a structure to suppress and to stop people going into areas of legitimate research because of ridicule or dismissal. Sometimes, in terms of scientists, literal dismissal, if you don't sing from the song sheet. So questions like why the scale of child abuse, and so many other questions, why do they do this, why do they do it like that, why is that happening, can be explained. I'm explaining it all in great detail at the Wembley event in October, but it can be explained, but only if minds are prepared to open and perceive possibility beyond the confines of their lifelong programmed, indoctrinated sense of everything. And it's not even that you need to sit in a darkened room and tune in, although that ain't a bad thing. You don't even have to be dark, because evidence that the accepted view of everything is simply not true is there in hard facts, if that's what people perceive everything through. Because if you look at the findings of quantum physics, you see clearly that this solid world is not solid. Actually, what it is an information field or information fields, and we are decoding those fields into a reality, just like this computer here decodes the internet from information into what we see on the screen as graphics and pictures and videos and all that. So if we get down to basics in terms of the worldview, you say to most people, is the world solid? Well, yeah, mate, of course it is. Look. But it can't be. So there's suddenly not only a vast new point from which to observe everything and perceive everything, there's also the end of limitation. Because if you perceive the world to be physical, solid in the way that we perceive it and experience it, then so much is not possible. And so when people like me come along and say, this is how it's done, and that's how it's done, and that's what that is, and that's how that works, they say, you're mad. You can't do that. You can't do that with a solid world. No, you can't. You can't. But the world ain't solid. It's an information field or fields that we are decoding into a sense of reality. And our perception of reality massively influences, in fact, dictates the reality that we decode and thus experience as what we call our lives, because this is a global agenda of mass and individual mind control, so you find it going on everywhere. But of course, there are certain centers where you find it most concentrated, and the United States and Britain and anything to do with Mossad in Israel are some of the major centers, in fact the major centers that you'll find in terms of the manipulation of the individual and collective perception. And that's what it is really. My latest book's called The Perception Deception, because when you look at how you control individuals and most certainly the population in general, you have to manipulate their perception of reality, their perception of self, their perception of world events, and their perception of endless situations. Because from that perception comes their response and comes their behavior. So if you can manipulate their perception to see things in a certain way, then you can manipulate them to support what you want to do as a result of that, or to oppose something you want opposed, or to turn against someone or some group as a result of the manipulation of perception. It is the whole foundation of the global conspiracy and the manipulation of the human race. It's controlling, manipulating, and implanting their sense of reality, their perception. Now, this can be done on a mass scale, and I will talk about that in other places, and it's all in my books.